The alarm bells are ringing across Europe. Putin's mysterious little green men have appeared at Estonia's border, a chilling echo of Crimea 2.0. Meanwhile, the EU launches its biggest defense reform in decades, openly preparing for war with Russia. And Britain is stepping in to help defend Ukrainian skies, building a new shield against Russian missiles. The message is clear: Europe is done waiting. The war is coming closer. Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zoroslava Kolesnikova, and this is where we tell the truth the Kremlin fears most. Putin's little green men appear at Estonia's border. A new crisis is brewing in Europe. Putin's little green men, armed unidentified soldiers, have been spotted right on Estonia's border. Is this a prelude to Crimea 2.0? Western media have released footage showing masked men near border checkpoints. Tallinn has already shut down its eastern borders and raised the alert level. Is the Kremlin testing NATO's reaction or preparing for something bigger?
Putin's little green men are already at Estonia's doorstep. It looks like the bunker dweller is preparing a Crimea 2.0 operation in Europe. Western media are publishing footage in which you can see armed men on the road. Judging by their uniforms, it's clear these are definitely not Russian border guards. Due to this sudden activation of unidentified Russian troops in the areas of checkpoints between Russia and Estonia, the police department has urgently closed the country's eastern borders. We decided to close the road to prevent possible provocations and incidents. Our main goal is the safety of the Estonian population. Kunta Pidosk, operational head of the Southern Prefecture. The safety of our own population is the top priority for all Baltic countries. For example, today Latvia is expelling at least 841 Russian citizens from the country. These are Russians who were unable to prove even a basic knowledge of the Latvian language. The EU country no longer wants to see the Kremlin's fifth column on its territory.
The stay of such Russians in Latvia will be considered illegal, and their access to social services will be closed. If these Russians remain, they will face deportation. Madara Puke, representative of the Latvian Office of Citizenship and Migration Affairs.
Due to the possible Russian attack on NATO, the alliance is preparing to evacuate 1.2 million people. According to the authorities of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, this is the number of citizens who would need to flee from war in the event of aggression from the Kremlin. This concerns at least a 40-kilometer strip along the borders with Russia and Belarus. For Lithuania, this would mean a total evacuation. In this case, even the capital would fall into the potential frontline zone. However, in Vilnius, they are confident that such a scenario is unlikely.
An emergency of such scale, which would require evacuating Vilnius entirely, is unlikely to develop in just one day. That is, it may well be necessary to start with some localized evacuations of the eastern outskirts of the city or even individual neighborhoods. But we proceed from the assumption that ultimately our resources must be prepared for the evacuation of all 600,000 residents of Vilnius.
Meanwhile, in Estonia, which has closed its borders, local churches, schools, universities and sports arenas are already actively preparing to receive internally displaced persons. Special transportation, trains and buses are being allocated for this purpose. Residents are being assigned to potential evacuation points and given maps and information about the evacuation routes. Europeans themselves are stocking up on provisions, first aid kits and packing emergency bags in case they need to flee suddenly.
People have been talking about this for a long time. For the past several weeks, even months. At work, everywhere. We'll see how things turn out. For now, we need to take care of the most urgent things.
In total, the population of the Baltic countries exceeds 6 million people. Of these, almost 2.9 million live in Lithuania, nearly 2 million in Latvia, and 1.4 million people in Estonia. In Vilnius, evacuation plans are being prepared for about a quarter of the population, in Latvia for a third, and in Estonia for 10%. And that's taking into account the most optimistic forecasts. According to military analysts, if Putin launches a full-scale offensive against the Baltic countries, every single resident there could become a displaced person.
They have platforms for various types of missile weaponry, which can strike in the shortest possible time. As one of our sources told us, these systems can literally be rolled out of garages, for example, at the Luga military base, 100 kilometers from the Estonian border, loaded with Iskander missiles in 5 minutes, and launched in quantities that would cover the entire territory of Estonia and most of Latvia.
Meanwhile, Russian propaganda is foaming at the mouth, insisting that the Kremlin's intentions are purely peaceful and that the Baltic countries supposedly have nothing to fear. Even the bunker dweller himself, putting on an innocent face, tries to reassure the West.
We ourselves have never initiated military confrontation. It is pointless, unnecessary, simply not needed, and simply absurd. They can't possibly believe this. They can't possibly believe what they're saying, that Russia is planning to attack NATO. Because it's impossible to believe such nonsense.
In much the same way, right before February 2022, Moscow was insisting that they had no intention of invading Ukraine. Earlier in 2014, Putin also denied the involvement of Russian army soldiers in the annexation of Crimea. So it's no surprise, as soon as the little green men appeared, the Baltic countries began preparing for the worst.
The nature of hybrid warfare is such that you might not realize, is this already a war, a single attack, or just an accident? Take, for example, the damaged communication cables in the Baltic Sea or the plane that recently crashed in Lithuania. An attack or an accident? Not to mention the constant problems with GPS signals in the area of the Suwałki corridor.
And adding fuel to the fire at NATO's border is Putin's loyal friend, Alexander Lukashenko. The latter has resorted to yet another dirty provocation. He suddenly put the Belarusian troops on alert. The country's Ministry of Defense cheerfully reported that units are already moving out to designated areas to carry out the tasks assigned by the leader.
The armed forces units, which are involved in the crucial combat readiness check, are currently moving to their specifically assigned operational areas.
However, analysts insist that all of this is more for show than actual preparation for a real invasion. Belarus will continue to constantly escalate the situation and threaten with combat readiness checks. As for the Russian army, it is so bogged down in the war in Ukraine that the Kremlin simply doesn't have the resources to open a second front. Nevertheless, everything could change quickly.
Recruiting new soldiers takes quite a long time. But in principle, this is probably a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. Because there are enough combat-ready units at the front in Ukraine, so all that's needed is to simply transfer them. That wouldn't take much time, and then arm them somehow, reorganize them.
Among experts, there is an opinion that Russia is already preparing for war with NATO and could strike earlier than intelligence agencies expect. For example, the American Institute for the Study of War claims that Moscow has entered the so-called Phase Zero in preparing for a confrontation with the alliance. Russia is creating reserves and developing new tactics for waging war without the mass use of armored vehicles, and is capable of launching new aggression without waiting for the full restoration of its army after the war with Ukraine. Whether Putin will lose his nerve or actually attack the Baltic countries, we will find out very soon.
Europe prepares for war with Russia. A new defense era begins. The Europe we once knew is disappearing. The continent has spent decades building peace and unity is now reshaping itself for war. According to Bloomberg, the European Union is launching a massive defense reform, the 2030 plan, to prepare for a potential direct confrontation with Russia. It is the dawn of a new European army, or the end of peace in Europe as we knew it.
The EU is preparing for war with Russia.
And the Europe that we have all loved so very much is slowly but surely disappearing.
Bloomberg reports that the European Union will launch a large-scale defense reform to be ready for war by 2030.
Plans are great, but once again, they can run into reality and be shattered by that very reality, especially if they depend on supplies from China, Southeast Asia, or, for example, Taiwan. And if, for instance, there is a war in Taiwan, that means Taiwan won't be shipping microelectronics to anyone. Those goods simply won't be produced. And all these 5 or 7 year plans end up falling apart and getting pushed into the indefinite future.
According to the plan, by the end of 2027, the European Union intends to make almost half of its arms purchases jointly. And that's, just for the record, twice as much as now.
Money isn't a problem. The money is there. The real question is whether there will be anything to buy with that money. This isn't like going to the supermarket. The military industry is such that a lot of things are only produced with advance payment. Well, only with advance payment. You sponsor it. In other words, you finance it, you pay for it, and then they'll produce exactly what you paid for. You invest, and only 3 or 4 years later do you actually receive your goods. This doesn't happen quickly. Everything moves very slowly.
But for the implementation of joint projects in the fields of air and missile defense, they plan to create international coalitions as early as 2026. But will this really affect all European countries?
Most likely, the countries that are closer to the Russian Federation, the countries that are the drivers of the European economy, like the UK, France, Germany, and those geographically closer to Russia, such as Poland, the Baltic states, and Finland, will of course be the most interested. Italy, Portugal, Spain, they're kind of far away, all of them are far away. I don't think they'll be very interested.
It's no secret that for a long time Europe relied on the US when it came to security. But with Trump's arrival, a lot changed.
Trump froze relations with the European Union. For the first time in history, the US and Europe stopped looking like a united West and allies. Trump avoids contact with EU officials, ignores their appeals, and simply doesn't respect them. Instead, he communicates directly with the leaders who interest him, bypassing the EU leadership. Without the usual US support, both military and financial, the EU risks turning into a museum continent with a bright past, but a weakened economy and industry.
So just how dependent is Europe on the US already, even now? And is it really capable of defending itself?
Europe doesn't produce everything that the United States of America has. Apparently, they'll remain dependent for at least another 10 years. But the first signs that Europe could start to do without US assistance are already beginning to appear. It's clear that Europe, together with the US, carries much more weight than Europe without the US.
Europe is planning to arm itself. But why? After all, if you listen to the Kremlin dictator, Russia is the most peace-loving country in the world.
It turns out that war with the Russians is almost at the doorstep. They repeat this nonsense, this mantra, over and over again. They can't possibly believe what they're saying, that Russia is planning to attack NATO. Well, that's just impossible to believe.
Maybe the European countries simply misunderstood the Kremlin's sincere intentions and are wasting billions for nothing.
Russian propagandists often complain that right now is the best moment, while Europe is weak, while it's divided, while the US has drifted away from Europe to take some decisive steps toward those countries that interest them. Again, that's what the war correspondents say, but Russian leaders are a completely different story. They look at it differently. They consider whether there are financial, political, or military opportunities and try to predict the outcome.
Putin's Russia is full of surprises. And even when its dictator says one thing, in reality, the exact opposite can happen. In such a case, the best option is to play it safe, which is exactly what Europe has decided to do.
Britain to help defend Ukrainian skies, new air shield on the way. The United Kingdom is talking to Ukrainian skies. London has announced a new stage of support, helping create a joint air defense system. British technology missiles and instructors will become part of Ukrainian's future air shield. Will this finally shift the balance in the air and stop Russia's missile terror?
The United Kingdom is strengthening Ukraine's skies. Hundreds of missiles for air defense systems were delivered 5 months ahead of schedule. This was reported on the British government's website during the visit to Kyiv by the Minister for Defense Readiness and Industry, Luke Pollard.
The development of industrial partnerships is important so that we can learn from their experience and together build the industrial base necessary to defend the United Kingdom, deter our adversaries, and support Ukraine.
We are talking about light multi-role missiles, LMM, which are produced as part of the British military support program for Ukraine. This is a high-precision missile measuring 1.3 meters in length, weighing only 13 kilograms, and with a range of up to 8 kilometers. It is equipped with a laser infrared guidance system, and its 3-kilogram fragmentation warhead with a proximity fuse makes it effective against both aerial and ground targets. The missiles can be launched from various platforms, including ground-based launchers such as MANPADS, the Stormer SAM system, HVM or Rapid Ranger, as well as from helicopters and ships.
As illegal Russian aggression continues to intensify, European countries must unite and strengthen their support. Ongoing and sustained industrial cooperation, both with our dedicated government colleagues and our vital international allies, remains the only truly effective way to ensure a safe, secure, and prosperous future for the resilient people of Ukraine.
British support is not limited to supplies. At the same time, a new major phase of industrial cooperation has been announced. The package of £1.6 billion sterling, approximately $2 billion, is intended for integrating LMM missiles into Ukraine's air defense and expanding joint production capabilities. According to Luke Pollard, the total volume of UK military aid in 2025 will reach £4.5 billion, or $5.6 billion, a record figure for London for all time. And now, another key element of cooperation. The United Kingdom and Ukraine are launching joint production of interceptor drones. The project could start in the coming months. We're talking about a production line capable of turning out around 2,000 interceptors per month. Such production rates are exactly what's needed to counter massive swarms of Shahed drones and other large-scale attacks by combat UAVs. The first production lines will be set up in the United Kingdom, but the project structure is designed to be flexible, so it can quickly respond to the needs of the front and relocate capacity closer to Ukraine if necessary. The British side promises to contribute development, research expertise, and modern manufacturing technologies that Ukrainian factories currently lack. This is not just a supply contract, it's an attempt to create sovereign capabilities for Ukraine. Equipment, technical support, training, and joint research and development chains. At the same time as the UK, the Netherlands also discussed a memorandum on joint drone production. European partners are building industrial cooperation that is meant to function not as a one-time delivery, but as a series of production lines, services, and training.
In other words, while we have long since successfully matched the impressive quality of drones with the so-called Russian, actually Iranian-Chinese, Shaheds, the truly significant and pressing question was, can we effectively scale up our own production capabilities in the same remarkable way that Iran and China have so successfully done for Russia? Well, it turns out we could. So, when it comes to long-range drones, we're now close to parity not only in terms of the quality of the machines, but also in their quantity, which is extremely important in this case. After all, this isn't the kind of war you can win with pinpoint strikes alone. Here, the sheer volume of strikes is what really matters. It's necessary, well, when we're talking about figures like a 20% reduction in all of Russia's oil refining industry. That's when you need operations on this kind of scale. And now we finally reached that scale.
Other allies of Ukraine are also preparing new support measures. The United States plans to continue supplying advanced weaponry, including air defense systems, artillery and cruise missiles, as well as strengthening Ukraine's defense infrastructure. According to preliminary plans, in 2025 to 2026, the volume of military aid could amount to several $billion. Among the European countries, Germany and France are preparing to supply armored vehicles and ammunition, as well as expanding the training of Ukrainian soldiers at their training centers. Poland and the Baltic states are considering the possibility of providing additional types of weapons and equipment, as well as conducting joint exercises to enhance the combat readiness of Ukrainian troops. In addition, the allies are developing plans for the long-term integration of new air defense systems and artillery complexes so that Ukraine can build a resilient defense network and prepare for possible escalation from the Russian Federation. As part of humanitarian support, there are plans to expand programs for infrastructure restoration, medical assistance, and the training of specialists to work in crisis conditions.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you stand with truth, like, comment and subscribe. Want to do more? Become a sponsor and join our front line of information defense. Your support helps us fight Russian propaganda, tell the world what's really happening and keep Ukrainians' voice strong. Stay informed, stay strong and stay with Ukraine.